The World Poetry Cafe. It's a real privilege to be asked to do it by the curator, Nick Toxic, who's putting loads of work into this. And I'm going to do poems, I suppose, from just across time, really. Some that I remember from way back, and some that are quite fresh. And I think it's like stepping off a cliff, isn't it? You're doing a poem you've never read before. This is fresh off the page, and it's only written today. Because I've had real difficulty about writing about the position we're in right now, and trying to find something else to say. So many great poets out there doing some really good stuff about this crisis. And then this one just popped up, and it was kind of given to me by life. Among the coins strewn across my desk, cents, dimes, quarters with state emblems on their backsides, a Moroccan dirham, a Romanian 10-pound piece, assorted British copper, and a Paddington Bear 50p, is a Sainsbury's makers of the Millennium Coin, now over 20 years old, from a time when we, filled with optimism, look forward to a century free from massacres, poverty and disease, and we humans will begin to love ourselves and the earth we dwell on. This commemorative piece sits in front and centre of my haphazard life. Of all the 21 makers of the Millennium, Sainsbury's chose from their very pale consciousness the one that surfaced from my chaos featured Alexander Fleming, the scientist who gave us penicillin, apt at this point when scientists could be the stars of the moment and research laboratories the studios where blockbusters are made, as we hope for another Alexander making another great leap of faith, a eureka moment born of months of painstaking research, so we, the people of this world, carrying their team on our shoulders and praising them with anthems from the stands, can go about our business again, knowing science was at our back. Well, I've got a lot of friends I can't see at the moment, and all this stuff is all these were written, I suppose, in the 90s when I first went to Texas, and I made some great friends there. And so this is just, I think, the first of some travel poems I'm going to read. Set out in Wimberley, and it was I bought a bicycle, and I remember this day precisely. We'd run out of coffee, and I went down to the country store to buy coffee, and I was got a huge tin of coffee, and the sheriff was in front of me in the queue, and he looked at me and he looked at my tin of coffee and he went, "Go ahead, boy, your need is greater than mine." So this was kind of my homage to the hill country. Fire ants bite my feet, and I'm being chased by terriers on my bicycle right in the middle of an early morning coffee crisis. At the country store, I meet the sheriff. He buys bread, cigarettes, but seeing me at the checkout clutching a tin of Colombian Supreme, he agrees my need is greater than his and expresses sympathy. Dream catching in the hill country. We down 2 mugs each and sample the sampler. The trees are full of music, and the ground offers up words to the poets. Songs fill the room where we camp, and the primary goddess grins from ear to ear. 5 days to go, and she with her own corner of paradise back, and we can almost smell the flowers and feel the wings of butterflies against our cheeks. Up here, they shake your hand and put their arms around you. And you know, they don't know the meaning of cold, but last night in the city there was a distance. And it took drums and fire and wild words to melt the frozen masks of the revellers, listening to lyrics of love. Leaf shadows shimmer on the window frame, and the sun catches the branches of trees as they wave in the wind. My heart fills the whole of my body, and I understand why birds migrate in the fall. And another Texas. I'll do a couple of Texas poems, all from that same trip. Sitting on the porch at, this is called Sometimes You Get Lucky. Sitting on the porch at Sue's place, I crease my eyes at the sun's glare and listen to Spider John Corner on the music machine. Sometimes you get lucky. Like yesterday, skinny dipping in the Blanco, I shared the river with fish, ghosts and a dark-haired water nymph whose voice sent shivers down my spine and made me want to live forever. Later, we all sat round the fire, shared stories, songs and a poem or two, and Bob blew spirit notes on his flute while a drum played the rhythm of the ancestors. Watching the dance by the light of flame and ember, the night trees framed the movement of grace, and we were all blessed. Sitting on the porch at Sue's place, I rock backwards and forwards, drink coffee, listen to Ramblin' Jack Elliott on the music machine, and know, whatever the television and newspapers tell us, it was really me who won the lottery, and all the rest of the world has to do is claim its share. We'll come back to travel later. This is I was thinking, I was thinking about, I've met a lot of veterans in my time, and there's always stories, and how we view them. We're kind of weird about servicemen. You know, at some time, I mean, I was alive during the Vietnam War, and I was out protesting with everyone else, and quite rightly. And we were kind of weird about the soldiers and the servicemen. You know, either they're heroes or villains. So this is called veterans. They were all veterans. Anyone more than 2 years old when I, a bulge baby, came screaming into the world in my nan's front room. I remember the house in Essex Road and the backyard with its outside toilet and vegetable patch, and my granddad, who found me looking for a policeman to show me across the road when I ran away from home at 3 years old. I was going to see a friend at Tilbury. I'd met him on the district line with my dad. He cracked a joke asking me what I was going to do when I retired. At that moment, we were passing a pile of tyres on the dockside, and the words merged like the trains that met at the bottom of our cul-de-sac on the way to Barking Station. The steam trains ran at the bottom of our yard, and we stood in the alley waiting for them. Powered by electricity, the trains on the other side of the road weren't half as interesting. There were bomb sites too. Big, gaping holes, strewn with rubble and half-standing walls. I thought everywhere had bomb sites and had no idea of the carnage they represented, only that on Armistice Day I heard the salute from the big guns on the Thames, and we stood in silence for 2 minutes. I did know that in that war there were no civilians. The evidence was everywhere. Gas masks and tin helmets, drawers full of medals from past conflicts, and ration books. I remember the ration books. By my 16th birthday, I learnt there were other wars, fought by those who chose or were cajoled into joining, and with each decade came new veterans, scarred beyond recognition, inside and out. And maybe, because now most of us in the West are civilians, they become other. Whether heroes or villains depends on the year. I've listened to their stories, from Vietnam to Iraq. I've listened to them describe close shaves. Well, this week, I heard how a man in a doorway watched as his Oppo caught a bullet. It got lodged in his buckle and caused no injury. He still has it. Superstition, I suppose, was the teller's closing line, making sure there was no hint of bravado. Before his father came down to save him, my relative lay in his room in the prosperous south, afraid to ask for a carer in case they billed him again for all of his war pension and more. He led his men away from an ambush in the desert, saved them, and ended up a cripple. Folks doing a job, I say. And like all industrial injuries, they deserve to be looked after by those who own the machinery. There are heroes in every walk of life. Folks doing a job. My cousin was a fireman, another service. He came out almost unscathed. Another man doing his daily work. Cold, I know, but mine was a service family and armaments were my father's trade. Just folks doing their job in extreme circumstances. Maybe, if we were all veterans, we would understand that and reserve words like hero or villain for individuals when we knew what they actually did. Meanwhile, I listen to stories from those who carry images inside their heads of broken bodies and fallen comrades, and places where it's impossible to tell who the enemy was from those who could bear it no longer because they could no longer differentiate between those who gave the orders and those they were ordered to kill. I sat in a room in Dresden as a Lebanese friend from the village that had been shelled from the sea thanked my friend who had been in the Air Force at the time for a line in a poem recording the incident. I didn't think anyone noticed, he said. In the Middle East, I talked to a man who'd lost his brother in the civil war across the border, who spoke with a fatalism, seeing no end to the conflict. We asked him what he thought would happen. Ask me in a year, he said. After the Falklands, I met men in prison who could not survive outside the ordered life of the army, and men who grew their hair and went on the road, not because they were homeless, but they needed to breathe the sweet air of freedom. And one, after a life defusing bombs in Northern Ireland and beyond, was defused himself with antidepressants and sedatives to stop him putting wives and children through doors and plate glass windows. A friend who was conscripted and shipped out to Vietnam, where he joined the medical corps, was sent to the front line to pick up body parts just weeks before he was due to come home, and is still trying to piece them together between clown shows. And a Kurdish violinist from the Baghdad Orchestra, who sat and rehearsed in the town square as Iranian aircraft dropped bombs around him, killing all of his friends, who wrote songs so children could recognize landmines, who cooked for Americans who ran the charity until the day he was told to poison them, who ran away to stop himself becoming a killer and survived it all, but broke as he travelled 6 days in a wooden box in a ship's hold before being abandoned in Dover to live the life of an asylum seeker. And one who did not break, but escaped from police custody in Sudan because he noticed those who went in never came out. All folks surviving the extremes, almost, while most of us simply slept. Whoa. Someone was talking to me and he said, of course, John, you were born before rock and roll. And I never thought about it before, but, you know, like, my generation were. And there was very little, even when rock and roll happened, there was very little music on the radio. And Radio Luxembourg was really difficult to get, you know, it just kept going on and off. And then when I got to school, there was a record club, and it was a kind of county grammar school, but there were a few boarders. I was a boarder there, and we had so we'd buy a record every week, put sixpence or threepence or something in the kitty, and you'd vote for what record. I suggested one once, and I was the first year, and all the juniors voted for me, and it was the auctioneer, and all the seniors hated it, and I hid all evening so I didn't get beaten up. But there's nothing to do with this. This is called Musical Roots. Somewhere between the Cecil Sharp songbook and the Delta, I loved Shenandoah's Daughter, said farewell to the Red River Valley, left a little girl in Kingston town, jogged through Oklahoma in a Surrey with the fringe on top, toted ripe bananas in Jamaica while avoiding the highly deadly black tarantula, waltzed my way through Strauss's Vienna and watched toreadors fighting against their foes in Carmen, Spain. Once a year there were concerts on the radio by my mother's favourite songsters, Bing Crosby, Harry Belafonte, and Paul Robeson, who I learned was not allowed to leave America because he was a communist. These were punctuation marks like Christmas, Easter, birthdays, the last night of the proms, the Scouts' jumble sale and Bobber Job Week, and the man on his bicycle who sharpened knives and garden share. Meanwhile, we junior school children became Alabama bound on the Rock Island line and caught the last train to San Fernando before progressing to grammar school and eventually long trousers, where we journeyed to North Alaska, the land of the midnight sun. By the time I left for art school, I knew all about the Battle of New Orleans, powder in Gators' behinds, how the British kept a coming, and wondered why I failed geography at O-level. I'm going to look at the time here, because I can rattle on forever. That's okay. I've got a few minutes left, about 10 minutes left. I'm going to... I really worry sometimes about the way we treat strangers. This is called safe haven. I wrote it for an event. And I was thinking about, you know, how I travel a lot and how I've never, it's, you know, kind of a bit about privilege, you know, how being English, you rarely get stopped anywhere, and you're let in most countries. Even coming back into America from Mexico one year with a party of Americans, run by, there was a minister, and they stopped us and he said, I had my English passport in my hand, and the customs officer said, are you all American? And they were just looking at the Hispanic looking students in the truck. No one was looking at me. And the minister just said yes, and we were waved on through. And I thought, yeah, there was me, white skin, white hair, white beard. And I thought, anyone who thinks there's no such thing as white privilege kind of got it wrong. We can't help it. We're born that way, but it exists. It's called safe haven. In my mind, not in my mind, in my mind I'm travelling now. I have to, because I'm stuck in this garden, and I can't travel anywhere. I can't even go over outside the gate. Well, I can to my post box in the front of the house, but that's about it. Safe haven. In my time, I've travelled across countries and continents in the cars and trucks of strangers. I've walked with no money in my pocket and across seas and oceans by boat and plane with no more than a return ticket and an invalid credit card. Once I was turned back at a border and they wrote in my passport, but nowhere did they call me names or put me in prison. Today, I carry with me the shame of a country that keeps the victims of war and violence in detention and calls this reception, the shame of a country that forces refugee women to go into charity shops and ask men to buy their underwear. Everywhere I have been, doors have opened and my plate filled. I've been feted by mayors and beggars in places where my nationality won me few friends. I was treated with politeness and we respected the rituals of travel. Where is the respect by those forced from their homes and families by histories our governments help shape? Where is the compassion for those who come face to face with hell's fury and have crawled on their hands and knees from the inferno? Heroes become parasites and victims villains in a web of lies spun by politicians who lack the courage to admit their own ancestry. Look closer and you might find the doctor or dentist you have searched for, but they cannot practice even as volunteers because of the nature of their arrival. You might find the football team created to raise money for the homeless because they were embarrassed at finding shelter in towns where some slept in parks and doorways. These were the fortunate to arrive before our leaders competed to find fresh forms of denial in this loud land, proud of its humanity and recently its ability to slam its doors shut. It's a face that changes, but there's no excuse for the rhetoric of hatred and tabloid-fueled abuse. It's last week's heroes who are next week's scared, become asylum-seeking illegals who be staying over where? It's your next-door neighbour, it's those travellers moving in, it's your mother, it's your father, it's your children, it's your kin, it's old Empire, it's New Labour, it's Rwanda and Margate Beach. There's no dreamland where the tentacles of racism don't reach. It's Kosovo, it's Norfolk, it's Auschwitz and it's Kent. It's claiming that we didn't know it's the way the truth is bent. It's a face that changes. It's Hitler in disguise, it's ancient. And it's modern, and it's lies, lies, lies. Oh, I think a lighter one, a little rhymey. I was when my mum and dad had a little house in the country, and there's an old bramble patch down the bottom, and they built about 10 houses on that in sort of mock Tudor style, and or mock Georgian. And for months, me and Mum had to wade through mud on the way to the village. And then I was at a party. I was at the gatehouse, and at a gatehouse, at this big house at a party, and there was this guy saying, "I was walking my dog. Where his dad had walked his dog, and his dad had walked his dog before him, and this pair of green Wellies got out of the ditch and said, 'Here, this is private land.'" And I told him exactly what I thought about private land. He went, "Margie, this man is threatening me." I don't threaten anyone, but I did write a poem called Green Welly Anthem, if I can remember it. They're building a couple of houses on my bramble patch and another where my chickens used to scratch. I made a bundle, but isn't it a pity that they've all been sold from the men from the city? We catch the 5:30 from Liverpool Street, and when we get home we're dead on our feet, but instead of relaxing, sitting down by the fire, we take off our pinstripes and dress like the squire. And it's green wellies, wax jackets and a Labrador dog, a wood-burning stove and a nice pile of logs. We go down to the local when we fancy jar, talk commodity prices as we lean on the bar, and the problems of making the oiks understand they're no longer allowed to walk dogs on our land. Our car's a four-wheel drive, though it's not a Range Rover, that's a bit OTT, and though we're living in clover, we do like to blend and not be ostentatious. After all, it was once their village, and one has to be gracious. There's a few locals left, though you don't often see them, so we're putting them all in a rural museum. It keeps the place tidy and doesn't upset the buying of houses that we haven't got yet. And it's green wellies, wax jackets and a Labrador dog, a wood-burning stove and a nice pile of logs. Just check the time here. Ooh. Right, I think I'm going to travel a little bit. I've had the privilege, storytelling and poetry has taken me all over the world. And I did a performance at the Algiers book fair, and I'd never been there before. It's beautiful. I've been to Morocco years and years before, and I'd never been to Algeria. And I got there. I was picked up at the station at the airport, and I went through this landscape, and it looked like it, and looking out at the sea, it looked like it came off from a sort of 1940s black and white film, or 50s black and white film. And when I came out, the most extraordinary thing, well, at the book fair itself, which was packed with thousands of people, and people were listening to me, sometimes in their fourth language. Their first language was Arabic, second Berber, third French, fourth English. And they're listening. And I'm thinking, I felt really ignorant with just English. And then when I left, and it's never happened to me with the customs before. Everyone was getting you had to get everything stamped on the way out, and the customs man said, "Have you got anything to declare?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Nothing but your good health. Please come and visit us again." "Thank you, sir." And no one had ever said that. I mean, you know, usually people at customs posts are viewing me with suspicion. This is the poem I write. This coast could have graced any of 100 Hollywood films. Its sea dotted with freighters and a shoreline. One North African urban sprawl, rising terrace after terrace towards the sky, modern in the extreme, even the old stuff. It challenges Europeans who think in straight lines, right angles and who think straight lines, right angles and abstractions came with the Cubists and Mondrian. The stray dog loping with its ribs jutting across the wasteland would have given some comfort, but it's the monument to the martyrs that dominates the skyline. It reminds me it was here my American literature professor stood on a runway 43 years ago to meet Eldridge Cleaver, who lived in this city in self-imposed exile, and how Fanon helped to change the thinking of a generation. And as if to confirm my thoughts, now in the second decade of the 21st century, the book fair is packed with tens and thousands of visitors and volumes stacked head high, while I am left humbled by the intensity of my audience as they listen to me jabber on in an alien tongue they are determined to conquer. As I leave, an official at the airport asks if I have anything to declare. When I answers nothing, he replies, "Nothing but your good health. Please come and visit us again." I correct myself and declare my good health and wonder where north of the Mediterranean I could have had such a conversation. I'm going to pop into Europe for a second. And I was there with my partner and her daughter. And I'm just going to check on the time again. That's okay. And I was doing school at some nurseries actually in Vienna, and we took a boat down to Bratislava and stayed at Bratislava for the night. And, you know, travelling with children is kind of sometimes, you know, it's either up or down, so this is great. She was both up and down. So it's Bratislava. Old town wonders, with pillowed crowns perching on the pinnacle of St. Martin's spire, and Fiona wired on sugar and chocolate cake. Too late to regret the 8-year-old's holiday diet at this point, when historical tours of old Central European cities slide meaningless, when her vague hankering for Viennese waltzes and newfound friends bubbles through a melancholy to recharge the aggravation gene, and yet there is nothing to compare with the wide-eyed wonder of a child as it looks on fresh landscapes and imperial moments in the midst of 21st century reconstruction, and all the while the feeling grows of belonging to the nice side of the earth. And I think I'm going to come back to England for my last poem. And it's called My England. This is my England. The Jews in Brent Cross Tesco's. My East European dentist in Finchley Road giving me my smile back, the Hindu temple in Kingsbury, where I wait for hours for my brother-in-law's coach to arrive from Romania, Kingsbury High Street with its shops full to bursting with fresh fruit and vegetables, its ironmongers, banks and butchers, where shopkeepers ask their customers which language they speak and are answered with French and English by people who might be expected by their look to speak Arabic or some subcontinental tongue. Kingsbury, where an old white English lady taking a stroll in the park with her Chinese friend asked if they can join me on the park bench where they discuss an overseas visitor's sightseeing tour. Meanwhile, in the Shires, there are those who bemoan the demise of the High Street and how nothing is the same anymore. Well, I just thought I'd finish on that, and with a picture of when we can return to parks, nod at our neighbours, and maybe after all this we'll learn how to speak to each other again. Meanwhile, thank you for listening. There's a little hat at the bottom if you feel like dropping a penny or two in. It would be gratefully received.